Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of Tide Illustrated. Jack Knowlton, Tony Sukalis, switching it up a little bit today. We've obviously got a lot of transfer portal and sort of pre-bowl game speculation stuff going on, and you can get to Tide Illustrated for all of that. But I thought, as hard as it is to pick a day within the constantly beating heart that is the offseason in college football, it's hard to pick a day to, switch things up a little bit. But I've decided today is that day. We're going to go solely basketball, Tony, because Alabama wrapped up its kind of gauntlet portion of its non-conference schedule. The Tide obviously have 3 games to go in non-conference play at the time of recording, at least. And then we'll start, of course, on January 4th, playing one of the new boys, Oklahoma, who joined the conference this year as their first game. But I thought this would be an appropriate time, given that we're kind of wrapped up with this 7-game gauntlet now for Alabama, to sort of take the pulse, have a basketball dedicated podcast, which I'm looking forward to. And we're going to kind of do it in a bit of superlative form to round up everything. Of course, if you've been living under a rock and missed the start of Alabama's season, they were 8-2, or they are 8-2 to start the year in a really, really good SEC. We're going to talk about that. And of course, the gauntlet run I'm talking about, they played 7 games here in the last month plus. All of them came against Power 5 opponents. They played 3 of them in the Players Era tournament over in Las Vegas. They played away games at Purdue and North Carolina, and then Illinois and Birmingham and Creighton most recently at home, where they won 83-75. They finished 5-2 in that run. They are now ranked 6th in the country, again, at the time of recording when the AP poll came out, Tony. So, there's a quick kind of pulse on everything. And like I said, going to kind of go in superlative form and just get sort of our general vibe from this last gauntlet of games here as Alabama, is trying to live up, and so far I think living up to their lofty preseason expectations. But we're going to start, Tony, through this 5-2 run for Alabama. For you, who has been the maybe biggest surprise individual player who has emerged? This is a super deep Tide roster. We've seen it all year, but who have you liked that surprised you?
Yeah, so we'd kind of seen it a little bit, heading into this gauntlet run, but it's got to be Mo D. I mean, Mo Diabate, we both thought that he was going to be like the end of the, roster guy, not play much. I kind of always wondered, I always thought he was a good player. So that's partially why I wondered, like, why is he on this team? Like, why is he going to be, battling at the end of this bench and not playing when he could probably just transfer to a team where he could impact them a little bit more? Well, I was wrong, because Alabama's been filtering through players like crazy. What did they have? All 11 active players in the first 8 minutes against Creighton the other night. So, I mean, everybody plays at Alabama, even in the big games. But Mo D, just the muscle he gives down low, he is like the epitome of the blue collar points. I did my my superlatives in my column over the weekend, and I gave the blue collar points. I just went with the numbers. And obviously Grant Nelson has the most blue collar points, but also Grant Nelson plays a lot more. I don't know the breakdown of blue collar points per minute, but I'd be
I'm sure they chart it.
It wasn't. I mean, actually, I could probably chart that just by looking at the blue collar points and then doing the minutes. But we don't do math in Tony's takes. So, blue collar points per minute. Just trust me on this one. Is Mo Diabate, and he's just a fun player to watch. I think he's become a fan favorite too, because people like to see the guys that are just willing to graft and do whatever it takes to get a win, and are so unselfish when it comes to just their style. He is a former, blue chip level recruit kind of guy. And, for him to just come in and take this role is so big for Alabama. And, he's just been fun to watch. So surprise for him. I always knew he was talented, but I didn't know he'd be this much of an impact guy for Alabama.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think preseason, the expectations felt a little bit lower, just with how good this roster is. It was nothing to take away from Mohamed Diabate. It was just somebody had to be the odd man out, right? And it felt like, it could kind of be him. And then all of a sudden that Houston game tips off. And, I've been a Mohamed Diabate fan for a while. I liked him last year. He's, just really good, really gritty, like you said. And that Houston game, man, he found another level. You mentioned kind of seeing it in spurts last year. The Grand Canyon game was the big one in the NCAA tournament, where he kind of took over that last sort of stretch of like 10 minutes and won. But that was Grand Canyon. This is Houston. in the Players Era tournament. They're one of the more physical teams in the country. And the guy just seemed to embrace it. He had 10 points and 16 rebounds in that game, won the hard hat. Then he won it again, I think, when they played Rutgers the game after that in the Players Era tournament. And yeah, it was just so much fun to see. He's exactly that player who, you saw it in spurts against Grand Canyon, but I think the big thing is he's now shown he can do it against some of the best teams in the country. That's going to be huge in the SEC. When you're down 6 points against a gritty Georgia team on the road, I don't know, pick your poison, and you can chuck him in there to get you, an offensive rebound and a block and a couple of stops. I mean, it's going to change the game for you. So I think he's definitely proven his value.
Yeah, I really think Alabama is going to attack opponents just in waves. I think that it's going to be the constant subbing is going to really just wear down opponents. And then kind of having a guy like Modi as just an extra wave of a big or maybe a 3, he can drop down to like play, 3, 4. It's going to really wear people down and then allow, Alabama to kind of keep other players fresh. You can play a small ball lineup and maybe rest a Cliff a little bit more or not go as big, because he provides that muscle. And then just having that extra bit of depth, I think that's really where Alabama is going to be a lot better moving forward or a lot better than other teams moving forward is they're going to continuously wear down opponents during games. And I think really when you talk about these SEC plays, or schedules where you're playing constantly good team after good team after good team, a lot of these teams are going to get worn down by that. And I think Alabama, with the depth it has, is going to be that that's going to really help them. And obviously Modi's a huge part of that.
Yeah, definitely. You've already started to see that with what you said with Cliff and him not having to play 35 minutes a game. And he's obviously getting used to Alabama's play style. But when you have a guy like Diabate, who you can play, like you said, at the 3, at the 4, even a small ball 5, you have a Grant Nelson who you can mix in at the 5. Aiden Sherrill is another guy who I think has been really fun in some moments as a freshman. So yeah, that front court depth has just made a world of difference. You looked even at Creighton, Alabama in that game last year. Oates brought it up, Nick Pringle and Mo Wage, 10 fouls in 31 minutes. I don't think a single player on Alabama had more than 3 the other night when they beat Creighton and forced like 14 turnovers. So, there's the difference right there between this year and last year. And Mo Diabate is a big part of that in the front court. For my sort of surprise player, I'm going to cheat a little bit here, if you will, because I'm going to go with Houston Millett because it's a surprise that we're even seeing him on the court.
Sure.
Obviously, one of the biggest disappointments this year for Alabama was losing Latrell Wrightson. And we're going to talk about Tony under the final of the Players Era tournament in a minute. But, you lose him for the year, an Achilles injury, which just totally sucks to see with all the injuries he dealt with last year. But, then you fast forward to the North Carolina game. They decide to bring this guy, Houston Millett, off of his red shirt. They were in theory saving this pretty talented transfer for next year. They decide, hey, we need you this year. He comes in. They were plus 12 with him in 9 minutes against North Carolina. He made 2 threes, had a couple steals, couple rebounds, looked completely ready to go in his first game back, having been a month behind his teammates in game time. And so I thought that was really impressive. Was a little quieter against Creighton, but you want to talk about replacing Wrightsl's output. I think you're going to have to do that as a collective, but man, this kid's a sharpshooter, and he seems like a really, kind of good stand-up defender too. So I've liked what I've seen from him in a limited role. And now, you get this nice surprise. Alabama fans getting to see the number 95, a unique number 2, play a year early.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like for him, I think it's just it's almost perfect timing. I mean, obviously you never want to lose your star player, but at the same time, you lost Reitzel at a time where Reitzel can now medical redshirt and come back. And you also lost him at a time where Houston Millett didn't lose enough of his current season that it made sense to burn the red shirt. And so really all you're doing now is you're flipping it, because I think most people saw Houston Millett as the replacement for Latrell Wrightzel next year. Now you're just getting it this year. And it's not a case of, when you have these situations where the guy's supposed to fill in next year as from a freshman to a sophomore, he's not totally ready to do that, in that first year, and you're projecting him to be ready that second year. With Houston Millett, you were only saving him for, because you only had 1 year of him. So you were just kind of roster managing. Houston Millett is just as ready this year as he would have been next year. So, I don't really think he's losing much. Obviously, I think this year's roster is probably going to be a little bit deeper than next year's roster. So maybe, yes, he would have had a little bit more minutes next year, but I think Houston Millett's still going to get plenty of minutes. I think some of that will depend on Chris Youngblood, who is also came back against Creighton. But even if, Chris Youngblood steps in and kind of contributes the way I think a lot of people are expecting, I still see Houston Millett playing a lot. It's not just the 3-point shooting. You mentioned the 2 steals against UNC, and I think he can contribute a lot. So he's not just this, luxury shooter that might come in and nail a couple of corner threes. I think he can actually
Devin
play
Cosby?
a big role. Yeah.
Devin Cosby was that last
Yeah,
year.
but
That's who I
I
think
think
of.
he'll be more than what
Oh, of
Devin
course.
Cosby. It's kind of hard to at times he'll be more than Devin Cosby was, and there will be times where he doesn't get it on to the floor much. I mean, there is 11 kids right now, and it's hard to get that in every game. But there'll be games when they really need Houston Millett, and he'll get his opportunity. And I don't think you're going to see a lot of players, have huge minutes for Alabama. They're going to be subbing a lot. So, but I do think he'll have his moments, and I don't think he's necessarily being cheated the way you might fear for a kid burning his red shirt.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the big dictator for him will be, just like you said, how much he's able to have an impact outside of making threes, and is he able to contribute to winning, and isn't just a warm body on the court for Alabama. I think he definitely can be. He's shown that at times at Pepperdine. I kind of put him in and Aiden Holloway. I sort of view them as the same. They're kind of sharpshooters who have flashed that they can do a couple of different things. Holloway had some pretty good creative numbers to start the year, limited the turnovers. He started actually turning the ball over a little bit more recently, which he'll have to clean up. But Millett, kind of same thing. You saw against North Carolina, like you said, the defensive stuff, some rebounding stuff. So I think it's, how much are you able to do that in addition to the shooting that they both bring? That's kind of going to, dictate where they're going to be, whether they're playing closing minutes, how much they're going to play against whom. But that's all for Nate Oates to figure it out. He's maintained all year. It's been pretty difficult to, he has a good problem on his hands of figuring out all the lineups and combinations and all that stuff. But yeah, Houston Millett been a very fun surprise for Alabama. My next prompt that I gave to you to kind of sum up this last run, and I like where you took this because, I asked for kind of your favorite moment from any one of these games, and you sort of broadened it out, which I really like. We've talked about this game against North Carolina. That was, of course, the first iteration of the SEC ACC Challenge. Alabama, a nice win in their second true road game, 94-79. And I know you liked what you saw in that game, but also just in general. And I think this is very worth talking about specifically to Alabama. The SEC has been damn good, Tony, to start the year, and was pretty dominant in this challenge. There were other teams that won along with Alabama.
Yeah, they were 14-2 in this challenge, right? And there's so many things you can take from the Alabama North Carolina game that was really good to see. You had Labaron Philon play well. You also had Houston Millett come in and shoot those 2 threes, and that was kind of his debut. And that was nice to see him burning his red shirt and kind of being an ultimate team player. But just from a whole conference standpoint, to just dominate. It's not like they dominated the Mountain West here. They dominated the ACC, a basketball conference. And the only 2 games that they lost were, was it Kentucky and Auburn?
Yep.
I more high
think
profile
Kentucky.
matchups, but
Yeah.
across the board, I think it just showed off the SEC's strength this season. They could get 12 teams in the tournament, which is absolutely insane. There's going to be SEC teams with losing conference records that you're going to look at their overall resume now and just say, well, you can't keep this team out. So it's insane. I just thought it was fun to follow along with that conference. You see that after that first day and you're like, holy crap, the SEC went, whatever it was, like 7-1, and then they just do it again the next day. And it was just, that was just kind of wild to see. There's just a lot of good teams. I'm excited about conference play. I think I saw something where the SEC's won like 80% of its games this season. Like
I know.
Yeah,
I know a couple weeks ago I saw a stat they were 45-15. There's been more games since.
They're like 120 of 140. Once again, I don't do math, so those numbers might not actually. But it was something like it's like it's a ridiculous stat. They've got 5 teams in the top 7 in the AP poll. What'd you say they had? What is it?
It's
9?
It's eight overall in the AP poll at the time of recording.
Yeah, and then 5 in the top 7.
Yep.
Alabama's one of those. So It's absolutely wild. I mean, you got teams like Oklahoma that nobody thought were going to come in, and
10 and 0.
that's now going to be a huge game for Alabama to open up SEC play. We're
Yep.
going to be having that on the 4th. Shoot, I mean, I haven't looked at Oklahoma's schedule, but are they going to be undefeated still by that time? I'm pulling it up right now. They've got they got a tough one. They got they host Michigan, so that would be a tough one. But then they got Central Arkansas and Prairie View A&M. So if they can get past this Michigan game on Wednesday. I think we're probably seeing maybe a top 10 matchup, maybe are close to it.
Close to it.
But
Yeah.
I think you're going to see probably if Oklahoma can get past Michigan, they're going to be 13-0. I think you'd probably look at Alabama at that point. I don't see Alabama losing before it faces Oklahoma. So you'd be 13-0 against 11-2. I think you'd probably see something around like a number 5 Alabama versus a number 10, 11 Oklahoma. So that'll be a nice little home opener for Alabama that nobody was really, or SEC home opener that nobody was really expecting to see at the beginning of the season. I don't think people like circled that Oklahoma game per se when the schedule came out.
Yeah, definitely not. The SEC has just been a gauntlet. And you mentioned, I mean, I'm excited for every conference game here for Alabama. The IBOB can't happen soon enough. Auburn has had an absolutely flying start to the season. And yeah, the SEC just in general has been great. Joe Lenardi in his latest bracketology, which came out, I think, a week or so ago, did have 12 teams. I'll add to, I mean, the AP poll, it goes deeper than that. They have 8 teams ranked. The next 3 teams that received votes to be ranked were all in the SEC as well. So yeah, it's an incredibly deep conference. You mentioned, yeah, there's going to probably be teams with losing records. Alabama certainly does not intend to be one of those teams, but certainly they're going to have their work cut out for them in pretty much every game. But, to draw it all back, this is why Oates does this, these types of things like the 7-game run Alabama just had. It's to prepare for years like this when the conference is just, absolutely elite from top to bottom. So, yeah, very exciting. Alabama's first few conference games: Oklahoma, South Carolina, which has the worst overall record of anyone in the conference, and they won they were up there in the league last year, and then ranked games against Texas A&M and Ole Miss as their
and
first.
That's at South Carolina and at Texas A&M. So those are the trickier games. And South Carolina game, if you don't forget, that's Nick Pringle,
the Nick Pringle Bowl.
Yeah. So, and he's actually, I looked at his stats while we were talking. I think he's averaging like 9.6, and so he's having a decent little season for them. So,
yeah, that'll be a fun revenge angle. But yeah, I like that take and just broadening it out. The SEC is damn good, and we'll obviously be talking about it all, year long in terms of conference play once that gets started in January. I just got a little bit specific with my favorite moment from these 4 games, and I think when I look back, or these 7 games, excuse me, and I think when I look back, at opponent, at least early on, so far this win is aging really, really well for Alabama, and that's their victory over Illinois. They won 187 in Birmingham. Illinois has been really good. They did nearly knock off number 1 Tennessee the other week, or just on Saturday. They lost on a buzzer beater, which was tough. Alabama probably wanted the Illini to win that one, but they're a good Illinois team. And the guy I want to highlight here in the performance specifically was Grant Nelson. He had 23 points, hit 4 threes in this game. And, this is a little bit of a tough take now because he actually hasn't made a 3 since the Houston game in the Players Era Festival. He's on a bit of a cold streak, but he was absolutely firing. And that was really the run. Alabama never really looked back after that. And I think it just shows, while Grant Nelson isn't probably ever going to be even a top 5 shooter on Alabama, it just shows kind of any of these guys can get going. And I think he's just really thrived offensively alongside Clifford Amore. His scoring is up, his shooting numbers overall, his true shooting percentage is up from last year. And he's actually been a lot better of a rebounder, which I think has been really interesting. I think Amore kind of occupying other teams' biggest players has allowed Nelson to kind of crash the boards a little bit better. So I think that's another kind of upstart benefit that we've seen. But his 4 threes against Illinois were so fun. They were all in the first half, and the crowd just got louder and louder at Birmingham when he was hitting them.
Yeah, that was the first time that we really saw this Alabama team play even kind of close to its potential. I mean, like they blew out UNC Asheville to start, but then they kind of played with their food a little bit against Arkansas State and McNeese. And then they go and lose at Purdue, and you're kind of wondering, like, not really, but you're kind of in the back of your head. You're like, okay, is this team like,
when are they going to figure it out?
Yeah, like, are they as good as what we thought? And then they come out and what did they have in the first half against Illinois? 52 points in the first half against Illinois. Yeah. So, I think that was the kind of their coming out party. Obviously, after that Illinois game, they beat Houston and Rutgers. So, yeah, it kind of that kind of lit the candle for this, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was, I agree with you. That was kind of the first, they got to the century mark against an actual Power Five team. And I think that is a performance they've been kind of looking to replicate, going forward, which, they're going to have plenty of opportunities. And, I think it's interesting. I'll have a take on the 3-point shooting in just a second, but that's a good segue because we're going to go from the highs to the lows here, Tony. Obviously, like I said, it was a 5-2 record. It wasn't unblemished for Alabama. They certainly had their moments, and I know a lot of those came in the Players Era tournament, which I know that was your biggest disappointment so far this season, or through that last 7-game run. What didn't you like about their performance there?
I just think we've seen Alabama. I think you just want to see them finish that, especially with the way it broke, and then you got. I mean, I'm not to say that this Oregon team is not good. They're actually a really good team, better than
Certainly
we
good.
thought at the time. But I think that was a winnable game, and they didn't finish out that run. I don't think they played super well in that game, and it's just like it would have been a lot. We would have been thinking about Alabama a lot differently if you just had that a 3-point swing there, and you give them that win. They win the Players Era tournament. It shows that they can win a tournament. That it's like. I don't think you're necessarily heartbroken over that loss will age well. I think this Oregon team's pretty good. But you had that, and in that same game, obviously, here's the other part of that game is you lose Latrell Wrightsell. That's what we talked about with the Houston Millette. So that was a gut punch game, just because I think Alabama should have won it. You come home with did they give a trophy for the Players Era tournament? Whatever, you still had that,
A
you
lot of
go
NIL
out.
money.
Yeah, I mean, they still got a lot of NIL money for coming
Yes.
in second, but I think they're just to be able to go out to Las Vegas and come back with a win. Whether I don't know if they give a trophy for that or not, but they probably do. But I think that would have been kind of neat to see. And then obviously, even more important than that, losing Latrell Wrightsell. Alabama's depth. We can talk all about it, but I think there's no way around it. Losing a guy that with his 3-point shooting, he's the best 3-point shooter on the team.
Yep.
Has great perimeter defense, great free throw shooting. He's a guy that's just a guy you would have wanted in the tournament. You're just not going to get him. So will Alabama be able to survive? Yes. Other teams are also going to lose players, and chances are they're going to hurt more for those other teams than they do for Alabama. But yeah, that if you're going to go for I guess the worst moment of the season, it's got to be that Oregon game for multiple reasons.
Yeah, that stung. I completely agree with you there. They struggled with turnovers throughout that tournament, and yeah, I think it's an example of you do totally look at this team, at least right now, differently. I mean, I think about it from a schedule perspective. I mean, you play Houston and Rutgers on back-to-back nights, 2 tough games that they were able to gut out and win by 5. Houston's gonna wear every team they play out. Rutgers has, I think, the number 2 overall pick in the NBA draft in Dylan Harper, and he tried his damnedest to beat Alabama in that game. You get through those games, and I think if it's schedule wise, you look at the NCAA tournament, you play a game on a Friday and a Sunday, or a Thursday and a Saturday, and then you have to turn around and play a game that next week. It was a little bit of a tighter window this time. You played on Wednesday and then Saturday, but you need to show you have the energy to kind of grit out what will be hard fought games in the tournament and then go to the next round and do the same thing. So, I think that would have shown a lot if they would have been able to pull that out. And I think they should have beaten Oregon. Again, struggled with turnovers in that game at 15 of them. So that's one thing I'm for sure looking forward to is how much they clean that up. But that was disappointing for sure.
It's kind of crazy how big this Creighton win was. I think after they beat UNC, everyone's like, okay, well, success, right? The gauntlet was a success. I think even if they would have, you even almost thought like, okay, if they somehow dropped the game against Creighton, it's still a success. But imagine if they would have somehow dropped that Creighton game and gone 4-3, does not look as good in a 7-game stretch as 5-2 does. Also, had they dropped the Creighton game, you're losing 2 out of your last 3 games. That I was thinking about that the other day. It's a huge deal that they were able to take care of business against Creighton, and now you have I don't think Nate Oates will admit it, but now you have kind of a chance to take a deep breath. You go at North Dakota, then Kent State, then South Dakota State. I mean, those should be easy. You really, what I want to see from Alabama moving forward in those games is just controlling the game. Don't play with your food like you did earlier in the season.
Mm-hmm.
Just get out to big leads and just kind of punish your opponents and rest players, make those substitutions, just wear teams down with your depth. You don't want to be in those close games with some of those teams. I think Alabama is just better than that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that'll be a good evolution from the mid-major games that they had to start the year. My thing that I'm nitpicking a little bit here because there is, again, a chance for this to improve, like with the turnovers. But for me, the biggest disappointment just in general, not necessarily a specific moment, because I think Tony nailed it, that was the biggest disappointment so far was that Oregon game. I've just been disappointed with, we really haven't, and we talked about it outside of kind of that Illinois game for stretches. We have not seen this team shoot anybody out of the gym yet. The 3-point shooting has just been relatively underwhelming, and it, Reitzel certainly impacts that. Like Tony said, he's the best 3-point shooter on the team. But this is a team shooting 31.8% from 3-point range right now to start the year. That's also Mark Sears' 3-point percentage, which I think it's very fitting because I think as he improves, the team will improve too. But yeah, they have not gotten, the same amount of just activity from beyond the arc. I guess I shouldn't say activity, more success. They have been taking a lot of threes, but really just have not been hitting it. Oates said it straight up after the Creighton game. We're struggling in that department right now, and I do think it says a lot about this team the way they have still been able to score without shooting. But I think as much as these at rim twos are a big part of what Oates does, I do think a huge part of his identity and his team's identity is hitting threes. And I think that is going to have to start for this team to ultimately prove that they are at that top of the top, especially in this conference.
Another thing, if we're just going to break out, like, I guess maybe statistical stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to down on this player, but Cliff Amore, 3 blocks in his last 6 games. That's not what we were advertised, I guess, when they brought in, Cliff the big red dog. You thought, he'd be swatting down 3 blocks a game. He hasn't really reached those numbers. Now it's been different. He's been subbed and there's been more rotation, but I'd like to see him kind of get a little bit more nasty, get those block numbers up, and just kind of maybe posterize some people with some blocks. Perhaps we'll see that moving forward. But if we're just kind of like things that I was looking forward to seeing, I kind of like the big guys, that's kind of like what I like to see. I'm more into the paint stuff than the 3-point shooting. So I just would like to see him be a little bit more dominant. I think I'm not saying that he's been a disappointment by any means, but just being that kind of nasty rim protector blocking guy, just getting a few more, just not only just blocks. I just want to see him like slap the hell out of the ball.
Volleyball spike it.
Yeah, some of that's circumstantial, but I'm just, if we're just disappointed in not being able to see something, I want to see him swat some balls into the third row of the stands.
I don't think you're alone on that at all. I mean, Nate Oates said before the Creighton game, hey, at Rutgers, he played a lot of guys in the non-con where he was able to kind of rack those numbers up because they didn't play as quality of opponents as Alabama does, kind of plain and simple. So he's had to adapt a little bit, the rotation stuff. I mean, his minutes are way lower than what they were in his last season at Rutgers. He kind of had to be everything for that team in most of his time there. But yeah, I think if he can sort of find a little bit, but I think there, and it goes to what you're saying. I think there is another level. I don't think we have seen
he had 4 blocks against Purdue.
He did.
I mean, it's not like he can't do it against good teams.
Yeah, he absolutely can. I think we will see more from Clifford Amore, but yeah, that hasn't been as, like you said, explosive, maybe on the defensive end as we thought we were getting when he came over from Rutgers, but we'll see. The last prompt I had for us was kind of going back to some individuals, and it was who you think might be the biggest sort of riser on this roster moving forward. We talked about, Diabate, Houston Millette being surprises. You've got your usual, suspects, the Mark Sears, the Grant Nelsons, Cliff, we've just talked about as a guy who maybe could improve a little bit more, but who else on this team do you think, also I think Labaron Philon, the fact we haven't talked about him all show, he deserves a shout as one of those who's been surprising.
He's probably Alabama's best player. Yeah.
Yeah. He's been completely phenomenal. Just so versatile all over the place as a guard. I think he's an NBA player. But in terms of guy you think could kind of continue to see his stock grow here as the season goes on, and we get into conference play.
Yeah. Derrion Reid, talk about NBA players. That guy makes an NBA move. I say one NBA move. He probably now advances to make or 2 or 3. just you see him make a move and you're like, wow, that's not many college kids can do that, or not every college kid can do that. You're gonna want to see the consistency grow with him, and you're gonna want to see that shot get a little bit better. But man, I think he's a guy that's gonna get better and better. And really, Alabama, with all the depth it has, doesn't really have that true three other than him. So you look at him and what is his measurables? But
It's about 6'8".
yeah, 6'8". He's got a lean body, so he's kind of what you kind of maybe he can play that three role better than anybody that Alabama has, and I could see him just being somebody that's going to continue to get better and better. And his numbers are great so far: 7.6 points per game, 3.7 rebounds a game. He's shooting 32% from three. I think just get that consistency up. I think he can be a big time player, an NBA player. I think he's the best NBA prospect on this team. I know Labaron Philon's playing really well, but when you look at the pure package and everything he offers, and I haven't even talked about what he offers on the defensive end, I think he is the best prospect from an NBA perspective that Alabama has. So yeah, 6'8", 220, a guy that you can kind of plug in multiple spots. I expect him to just grow. You're already seeing him grow. I think it's going to continue, and I wouldn't be surprised if he could even be a lottery pick, if he continues to progress like this.
He absolutely can be a lottery pick. And you touched on the defensive stuff. I think that's the most impressive side of it for me. I mean, he was going against Stephen Ashworth, who's Creighton's 30-year-old guard. And he's 24. I won't be too mean to Stephen Ashworth, but a good guard, a guard who takes care of the ball and makes shots. And they threw Reid on him, and Reid absolutely smothered him. He plays super physical against pretty much anyone he's guarding. That 220 build that he has gives him just a lot of versatility because he's fast. He clearly takes a ton of pride in being just a pest defensively. And I think Labaron Philon does that too, which I think is really what makes both of these guys standouts as freshmen. But I totally agree. He takes a ton of pride defensively, a ton of pride rebounding the basketball. Nate called him, I think he said one practice he was their best offensive rebounder. Has looked it in games at times and has seemed to kind of find a scoring punch. The 3-point shooting is not quite there for him, but he's had double figures in their last two games. He's finding ways to score. Tony mentioned it. He makes NBA moves in the paint. Even though he's 6'8", he can score on bigger guys. He's crafty, but also really physical. And yeah, I love his upside. He's super, super fun to watch on both ends. Just kind of harass people defensively and score and get breakout dunks. There's one photo I found. It's him and Labaron on a fast break. I think Labaron passed it to him and did the thing, when your teammate jumps while you're dunking it and you get the cool photo.
Kind of like the LeBron.
Kind of like the LeBron Wade thing. Yeah. Then I think that was kind of the epitome of these two freshmen. And I'll ask you too, just about Labaron quickly, because I mean, another guy who just absolute pest defensively, gets rebounds, gets assists. I mean, did not expect him to make as strong of an impact after being kind of a last minute addition to this insanely deep team.
Yeah, my dad watches. He attended his first Alabama basketball game of the season. He's not by any means a big time Alabama basketball fan, but he likes Alabama because he sent me and my sisters there. And then so he was kind of getting into it, and he's like, "Who's this Zero kid? He's really good, And so it's easy to kind of Labaron Philon's game just stands out. You don't even have to really know. You don't have to be a big basketball person to know that he's just everywhere. He's got. I felt like cringy saying this, but he's got that dog in him. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
He's the guy that plays, with a little bit of edge. He's the guy that's going to be trash talking the opponent a little bit. And he really does play really good defense. I mean, he leads the team with 1.3 steals per game, and he's just always kind of there. He's pesky, he probably is an NBA player. When you look at it, I think it's harder for him he's going to have to be even better, but he's 6'4", 177. So his size is not bad. I mean, I think with Reid, you just look at that 6'8", 220, and it's so projectable at the next level. LeBaron's not small by any means, but I think maybe there's a chance he comes back where I don't think there's a chance Derrion Reid comes back. But that being said, the way LeBaron's playing right now, probably not too much of a chance he comes back. He is doing very well. So
yeah, he's just excellent. I think for me, it's how much he's still a willing kind of for how much success he's found scoring, the way he's still kind of a willing passer and rebounder, I think is what has made him stick in this starting lineup alongside Sears. And then you mentioned the defense stuff that all speaks for himself. He just looks so hyped to be out there. Like you can tell how excited he is. He's a mobile kid. He loves putting on that Alabama uniform and just going out there and hooping. Another thing to appreciate too, Alabama fans, with Mark and Labaron, your backcourt is a combo of Alabama natives. I think that's lost in this day and age of high school basketball where you have all these kids. And I guess Labaron did this too. He did transfer to a high school in Missouri, but it's nice to have that home state.
Are those the only two on the team? Am I missing one?
Chris Youngblood is originally from Tuscaloosa.
Oh shoot, yeah, he is. He's from Tuscaloosa. Duh.
Yep.
So I think at one point, your whole backcourt I could totally see Chris Youngblood coming in and being that third guard where NATO likes to use 3 guards. Can't believe I forgot about the person that's literally from Tuscaloosa. But you could really have an all Alabama backcourt, which would be fun to see.
I love it. And that's a perfect segue because my prediction for the biggest jumper moving forward, maybe again slightly cheating here, it is Chris Youngblood. I think, Oates has talked highly about him, anytime we've gotten an update while he was injured. He's obviously back now. I mean, this guy was the co-AAC player of the year, with a guy named John L. Davis, who, if you don't remember that name, he went to the Final Four as Florida Atlantic's best player a couple of years ago. He's on Arkansas now. Youngblood came in from Kennesaw State and, in 1 year at South Florida, kind of earned those accolades as a super good shooter. I think, to me, just being a 5th-year guy has drawn a lot of praise for just his attitude dealing with this injury and how he's still been super present for his team. I think it's really, really promising. He can do some interesting stuff defensively. And then, like so many other guys in this team, his shooting ability and his scoring ability at all 3 levels, I think is super projectable for Alabama and super exciting. He had 5 points in his debut. Did look a little bit, behind the pace at times. I think it's just, and Oates said it, it's not just his ankle that has to fully heal. He has to get up to game speed. That is a real thing. And, I think that's going to take some time, but I think he is going to end up taking that 3rd starting role. I think that is going to be something Oates really likes to do. I think Reid actually also has a potential to take it over, but I do think you're going to see a lot of those 3 guard combos, or at the very least, Youngblood will be a guy closing games for Alabama this year because I think he's just really good and a really just good veteran option.
We talked about, Millette replacing the 3-point shooting you're losing by Latrell Wright. So definitely Chris Youngblood could do that. He could end up being the best 3-point shooter on the team. Obviously, it's going to be tough with Mark Sears, but one of those two guys.
It's good competition.
Yeah. I mean, and then you also have Holloway, who's been we haven't really talked about his shooting. He's been off and on. I think at his purest form, he might be one of the best 3-point shooters. It's just, I don't know if that consistency will click. But yeah, you could have, shoot. Can you imagine a backcourt, if you need a 3, having Mark Sears, Chris Youngblood, Houston Millette, Aiden Holloway, all on the court at the same time. If you really needed a 3, that would be absolutely insane. Yeah,
that's the 2K when you're playing NBA 2K and you're on the timeout and you click over to your 3-point lineup. That's what Alabama. It's right. Like Houston Millette at the center.
Sure. Yeah, I only had 4, so I don't know who'd put. Yeah, put Grant at the center. Put
there
Grant at the 5. So then you have a guy. Yeah, everybody on that 5 could do it.
Yeah, or shoot. I mean, Aiden Sherrill has only made 5 field goals all season, but 3 of them have been 3-pointers. That's one of my favorite stats.
He's a 3-point shooter. I mean, he identifies as a 3-point shooter. Hasn't quite hit it yet, but yeah.
Mohamed Diabate, I believe, has tripled his 3-point makes from last season. So I think it was 1
to 3.
Yep.
Okay.
So they all, that's the nature of an Oates team. They're all going to shoot. They're all going to have the green light. But yeah, I think Chris Youngblood is a super exciting guy to watch kind of going forward. And, as we kind of close things here, just sort of taking the pulse on Alabama, I like to look at, there's obviously a lot of things that do rankings now. And of course, the AP poll, Alabama's 7th. We talked about that already. A couple of metrics have them still super high. Nate Oates talks about good old Ken Pom all the time. They're 8th in that. He wants to be the most efficient team in the country. They're up there. Torvik is another one. They're 7th, similar to Ken Pom, measures efficiency stuff and ranks teams. They're 10th. They're 10th in the net rankings as well, which is, of course, the quad 1. You're going to hear a lot of quad 1 game talk. That's what keeps track of all of that stuff. So they're a good position there. And then I'm a huge, everyone, will criticize for speculating about the bracket in November and December. I love it. And Joe Lenardi, the bracketologist over at ESPN, has them as a 2 seed right now, which I think they certainly have a chance to get up to that 1 line when it's all said and done. But, Tony, I know you talked about the kind of schedule moving forward and stuff, but just any kind of final thoughts on where Alabama basketball is right now, given, these expectations were lofty preseason. We've seen some shaky stuff. We talked about it, but a lot of good as well. And I think a lot of exciting stuff to look forward to in albeit a very hard Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, I kind of think that this team, because it played with its food and because it had those losses, like, the close loss against Oregon, didn't win the Players Era tournament, I think it's almost kind of being slept on a little bit. I've listening to podcasts where people are saying, is it Auburn or Tennessee or the field? And it's like, well, hold on now. Like, if you look at the rosters, I mean, Alabama is just as talented as those two teams. I'm not saying that, I'm picking them right now to beat Auburn in the SEC or to win the SEC, but like, I think you could almost flip a coin between those two programs. I don't think it's that far away,
Yeah.
So I think that, I think if you look at teams that have the highest ceilings among the top 10 AP teams and stuff, I think Alabama's got to be right up there at the highest, because I don't think that they've played anywhere near their potential. It is kind of weird to project this team because it's not, they change so much every night. They are so deep, so you never really know what they're going to get. It's hard to prepare for them, but it's also kind of hard to project. So we'll kind of have to just take it, and it sounds really cliche, but kind of one game at a time. But I do think that this team has, it's got too many untapped potentials already that, I see them being even better moving forward.
I agree. I think it's going to be a fun, conference play season to cover for Alabama. How they make up for Reitzel's output is going to be really interesting, but we talked about they have the guys to do it. And there's going to be some growth, I think, still to come from these stars too, guys like Mark Sears and Grant Nelson, that I think they're going to refine and probably expand on the ceiling that they hit last year. And that's a scary prospect for the rest of the SEC, but it is a good field Alabama is going up against in a couple of weeks. First and foremost, though, you can catch them at 8 p.m. on CBS Sports Network on Wednesday. A homecoming game for Grant Nelson, Alabama at North Dakota. I'm pretty confident without looking it up that I don't think that's ever happened before. So that'll be a unique one to watch. But yeah, 3 more non-con games for Alabama before they roll into conference play. We'll have all the coverage of it on Tide Illustrated. So go over and subscribe to us there. Subscribe to us here on the YouTube. Like this video. Throw a comment down if you got a prediction or any takes on Alabama basketball. We'll have it all monitored going forward. Follow us on Spotify, too, if you're listening over there as well. Enjoy the upcoming games for Alabama basketball, and we will see you next time.